Hello everyone. So, with Homeworld 3 slated for a release sometime in 2023, I thought it would only be appropriate to go back and replay the Homeworld games for this particular channel. Therefore, this will serve as an introduction to that series. The Homeworld franchise is actually one of my favorites. I did a playthrough of these games back when I was running an older, now defunct YouTube channel around 2014. But at that time, I had no freaking idea of this thing called audio levels, so the volume on my commentary is all over the place. It's not particularly good, and it peaks really badly at times. So hopefully this time I'm going to at least get it right and have a decently balanced audio mix. So first off, a little bit of backstory on the franchise itself, and it's pretty convoluted, but here's a shortened, abridged version for you. Homeworld 1 was released in 1999. It was developed by Relic Entertainment and published by Sierra Studios. It was followed on by Homeworld Cataclysm in 2000, which was independently developed by Barking Dog Studios, although the canonicity of that game is somewhat debated. The proper sequel, Homeworld 2, was released in the year 2003, also developed by Relic and published by Sierra Studios. Then both companies promptly collapsed, and the Homeworld series went into, shall we say, limbo for quite some time. Several of the former Relic developers went off to create their own studio, Blackbird Interactive, in 2007, who were originally some creators of the Homeworld series, that being Rob Cunningham and John Aaron Cambates. The Homeworld IP would languish for a while in hell, pretty much. Well, it changed hands a few times, and at one point actually belonged to Sega and then THQ, but in 2013, THQ went bankrupt and the Homeworld IP went up for sale, with Gearbox and Blackbird Interactive competing for it. Gearbox would eventually acquire the license, and it re-released the original Homeworld 1 and 2 classic editions, along with a remastered version of both games in 2015. Prior to that, in 2013, development began on a game by Blackbird Interactive known as Hardware Shipbreakers. They intended the game to be a sort of spiritual successor to Homeworld, but Gearbox eventually had them folded into the Homeworld franchise, initially under the title of Homeworld Shipbreakers, and then it was eventually changed to Homeworld Deserts of Kharak, which was released in 2016. On a side note, for a long time the source code for Homeworld Cataclysm was reportedly lost, although I've heard different things about that. However, the game was somehow re-released in 2017 on GOG.com, rebranded as Homeworld Emergence. That being said, I don't really know the full story of that, and I've never played Homeworld Cataclysm/Emergence, and I don't really intend to play it either. Well, that might change, who knows, but anyway, I'm not really aware of the full story of the Homeworld Cataclysm, Lost Code, Emergence, whatever thing. I don't know, so don't ask me about it anyway. Based on positive sales of the Homeworld Remastered editions and the Deserts of Kharak game, Blackbird Interactive actually began development on Homeworld 3 in 2017, slated for release, of course, in 2023. So finally, it looks like some 20 years after Homeworld 2, we'll be finally getting another proper Homeworld game that is based in space. And of course developed by Blackbird Interactive, some of the original Homeworld developers. So it's like getting the band back together. I want to talk for a little bit about some personal nostalgia for Homeworld and why it means something to me in a way. Now naturally, I'm going to be approaching these playthroughs through the rosy-colored lens of nostalgia. Admittedly, right off the bat, there is some major bias for these games on my part, alright? I recognize that. I think it really is one of the first games, if not the first, to fully integrate a 3D real-time strategy out there. And this is back when kind of StarCraft was all the rage, and everyone thought like RTS just meant your kind of isometric view, top-down, two-dimensional game where you got a bunch of little units running around the battlefield, and usually they think of StarCraft. And while indeed StarCraft is probably more well-known and more popular, there is a strong cult following for the Homeworld series out there, because it's still probably one of the few games out there that does three-dimensional real-time strategy well. And of course, Homeworld was released in the late 90s, back when PC games still came in large boxes and in jewel cases, and you had to go to your local electronics store or big box store or whatever, go to the electronics and computers department, and you'd see just aisles and shelves filled with all these boxes of your different PC games and all that, and that's how we bought them. Homeworld also at the time had a sizable manual. It actually had several manuals to it, one of which was called the Historical and Technical Briefing that contained a lot of the game's world building and lore. And I remember back in the day, I think it must have been in the year 2000, I first got this game. I got the Game of the Year edition of Homeworld 1, and it must have been in the summer of 2000 if I recall, for my birthday. And in addition to all this stuff that the game just comes with, it contained a Prima strategy guide. And I think I still have that somewhere just buried in my closet. I don't know. Anyway, apart from, I think, Star Wars, I think the Homeworld franchise was really my introduction to a more hardcore style of space opera. This is kind of interesting. A particular memory that I have of playing Homeworld is it was a warm, sunny afternoon sometime in the summertime, around the year 2000. And I recall having the window open in my computer room, and I was playing the game, and there was a warm air blowing in, and I could smell the freshly mown grass and the scent of barbecue coming into the room. And I think my dad was like making ribs or something. So it's one of those weird memories that I associate with my carefree summers of youth and all that, right? You didn't worry about anything. You just sat down on a some day and played a game or whatever. That's just one memory I have. I remember playing Homeworld and smelling the warm summer air coming in and the fresh cut grass and the barbecue. That's just a weird nostalgic memory that I have. So apart from that olfactory memory, you might say, I'm just really heavily drawn to the design of Homeworld, specifically the design of the Kushan vessels. Now, from my understanding, the developers heavily took inspiration of the design of this game from the works of artists like Peter Elson, Chris Voss, and Ralph McQuarrie, among many others. McQuarrie is, of course, famous for his designs for the original Star Wars trilogy. The 3D nature of the game, the space opera story and the themes, and the music, I think, all come together to create a very ethereal tone to the game, almost mythical in a way, which we can see throughout the various Homeworld games. Anyway, since I have the remastered and classic editions of this game as part of like the Steam bundle or whatever, as well as Deserts of Kharak, my general plan here is to go through this series in the following order in preparation for the release of Homeworld 3. I first planned to actually start off with a read-through of the Homeworld 1 historical and technical briefing. So I'm going to go through that and read through the entire thing. Yes, really, because I think it establishes a lot of the world building and the lore of the game that's important to understanding kind of these people, because these are not humans in the sense that they come from Earth. They actually inhabit an entirely different galaxy. Then we're going to play the Homeworld 1 Classic, in other words, the Homeworld as it originally was. Then following that, we're going to move on to Homeworld 2, and we're going to start with the Homeworld 2 History of Higara. Again, another world-building lore document, so to speak, and we're going to read through that as well. Then we're going to do Homeworld 2 Classic, and then I think we're moving on to the prequel game, Deserts of Kharak. Okay, so I'm kind of doing these games chronologically as they were released. So we're going to go back to the 2016 game, Deserts of Kharak, and I'm going to go through the Expedition Guide. Again, more world building and lore. And then we're going to do the playthrough of Deserts of Kharak itself. Now, you may be wondering, okay, what about the remastered versions of Homeworlds 1 and 2? I'm currently debating about whether or not I'm going to do those, because here's the thing. I was a good chunk of the way through Homeworld 2 Remastered when the version 2.0 patch came out, and it pretty much wrecked the gameplay, and it horribly unbalanced it, like big time. It's a long story, but I essentially rage quit playing the remastered games, almost rage quit the series in a way, back in 2016, and I don't think there have been any significant attempts by Gearbox to remedy many of the issues since then. I think they pretty much stopped supporting the game after patch 2.1. So basically back in around 2016, they stopped releasing any fixes or patches for the game. Now, the main issue with the remastered versions, I think, is that Gearbox really tried to create a one-size-fits-all game engine for Homeworlds 1 and 2 for the remastered editions. But in reality, both games have different game engines. They model things differently, their physics engines are different. Homeworld 2 uses random number generation for its combat versus Homeworld 1, which uses a actual ballistics engine for its physics and combat. So it's just different. And I think Gearbox tried to create a one-size-fits-all kind of engine for both of those for the remastered editions. And the short and the sweet of it is that they essentially ended up fixing it until they broke it. And I know there are mods out there like the Player's Patch mod, which rebalances and attempts to remedy a lot of the issues with the game with the remastered editions. So I will take a look into those and test them out and see if it works. And maybe if I can get it to at least some way playable or bearable to play for me, then I'll do the remastered editions. But as it stands, I think at least we still have the classic versions, which are by and large untouched. They just play on modern systems and modern computers, so they still work as they originally did. And I think for now, those will have to suffice. But as it stands, I mean, the remastered versions are really just basically high definition, updated graphics versions of the originals with a somewhat changed gameplay engine. So we'll see what that's all about. So anyway, that's the long and the short of it. Again, I'm just going to go through these games chronologically, and we'll see if I can tolerate playing the remastered versions with some mods or whatever to fix things. And hopefully we'll have at least some of it done in time for the release of Homeworld 3. Good old trip down memory lane. Anyway, stay tuned for more Homeworld.